Okay, hello. Welcome to what is my first screencast that I've ever made for the weekly summer of February 3rd to February 7th, 2020. This is a completely new technology to me, so we'll see how this goes. I'm going to talk about the week, what we did Monday through Thursday, and then kind of wrap it up with talk of what I've learned and how that can be applied to what I do every day. So let's have a look. So the first thing certainly we want to talk about is the Spaghetti Bridge project. That was what we spent the bulk of class time, at least Monday through Wednesday, doing. So as you know, that we had a competition between our two teams, and my team went for a sort of an archway bridge, similar to what you'd see here, perhaps here, something along this line, something where you could see this archway helping to support the main line with some structure here to help support that and pull some of that weight, similar to something like that. Or yeah, as you can see, and this looks quite a bit more like our bridge in kind of reality, where these triangles are helping to support and pull the load, have the load pull on the archway, having the archway sort of support some of that load. Pretty ambitious project compared to our competing team. A little more straightforward design. Took us quite a bit longer, I think, than we had anticipated. And I've had some photos here of things you can see of our design and sort of preparing some of the pieces. We did quite a bit of testing on how to make our beams, and you can see that we even did some testing. This was a few weeks ago, but get an idea of how we were testing that. And from what we had thought, the beam structure that we had created looked to be pretty tough, and we were very optimistic about it. So we set off, you can see there's a pretty good indicator of just one strand and how tough it was, and we're pretty excited about that. So we set off to make some of these beams, sort of mass produce this beam. We've also created the archway, breaking it off into pieces and creating an archway. You can see there's breaks here. So it was sort of incrementally created. So there's a few pictures of that, and that came along, and again, it took us quite a bit longer than the other team, but we were hoping that extra time and effort that we're putting into was going to really make the difference. And as you can see, that was not the case. Now, fortunately for us, the PVCC social media team just happened to be in the classroom during our test, which was just absolutely fantastic to get that exposure for our bridge. You can see this is the last minute scramble to get this thing looking, get it ready to go. And then here's Noah with Tab's assistants getting that ready to test. And so we wanted to do 10 pounds right away because we knew that Tab and Casey's bridge had done 10 pounds and then some. And we knew if we had to beat them, we needed to at least start there. And as you can see, it just didn't work out. And Instagram will have this video kind of on replay so we can sort of watch this here. But a twisting here in this little area, and that torque began to twist it, and then it immediately failed, splintering the spaghetti. As soon as that happens, it's over. So I think we liked our design. Unfortunately, converting that over to spaghetti and hot glue, the execution of the design in terms of some very inexperienced spaghetti engineers, perhaps, was some failure there. Perhaps if we were able to better construct the bridge and understand how to glue some of these joints together a little bit better, maybe it could have been a much different scenario. Unfortunately, it did not work out quite as we had planned. And as you can see, the end result is that, right, leaving it in the trash can. So we spent the rest of the week, of course, working on the design by Tab and Casey, and I do believe I have a few photos in here of just getting that started. That was the bulk of class time. All right, so the big discussion post for the week was, of course, essentially the first half of the Digital Nation special, which aired nearly 10 years ago to the day that this week started, which was sort of coincidental, I suppose. But this especially by Frontline is now 10 years old, and it's starting to discuss the idea or just the application of technology in the average young person, high school student, even younger, really, just average student, K through 12, into college, and their life, and the benefits and the detriments of the internet essentially now being in that person's pocket or at that person's desk at all time. And what the first thing that struck me was the fact that this is from 2010, and we're now in 2020. So when this aired, I was 2 years out of college myself, and some of the things that they talk about. Oh, you have your laptop and that, and those are distractions, and I can pull my laptop out. We have laptops in the classroom, and they can be distracted on that. There were smartphones in 2010. I don't believe that they were as widely used as much. I certainly didn't get my first smartphone, I think, until 2011. So the iPhone had been around for a few years. Android was still, would probably have been a few years old. They mentioned BlackBerry quite a bit in the special. But the first thing that struck me is they're talking about the same things that I think many of us are now talking about today. In that 10 years time, the power of the technology, the power of the tool has grown exponentially, right? So now everybody has a smartphone that is capable of more than ever before. Everyone has one. It isn't a transition period like 2010 was. Young people have one. They're with them at all times. And it's hard to not look at a smartphone in your hand or the internet in general. It's hard to not look at it and compare it to almost a drug, right? Because I think it hits you and affects you in the same way that an addiction does. For many people, not checking their phone, not getting to see social media increases, or not being able to, or social media interactions, or being able to have a question answered, instantaneously. I think if you take some people's smartphones away, they kind of go through a little bit of a withdrawal, so to speak. And to me, it borders on an addiction, which is, of course, incredibly scary that we have that. And they talk about that a little bit in the Digital Nation. They talk about the young boy who, essentially has as close to a gaming addiction as you can, and they follow him to this sort of camp to get him out. I mean, in much the same way that you would take someone who's addicted to a hard drug and go through rehab. They're taking this kid out to like a rehab type facility where there's no video games, and unfortunately, based on the video, it didn't really look like he was learning anything from experience, other than he was just missing his video games a little bit more. But you really kind of have to treat it in that same sort of way. And I feel like, especially in today's culture, I think a lot of companies and industries have picked up on that commonality between a drug addiction and technology and internet addiction, because you start to see games and programs that, it's almost like a drug dealer giving a sample, like a free sample or a cheap sample, just enough to get that customer, that user, sort of hooked on it. Like I think compare that to the freemium game trend of today. You see ads all over on TV for free games. Oh, it's free to start, free to play. Join on this League of Legends or what have you, this type of game, and it's free, and you can play it and it's free. But to do anything worthwhile, to grow faster, to get premium items, you need to pay, and you need to start buying coins or something. You have to use real money. And that's how you get it. Then you get this addiction. So that's where the addiction comes in, is now in order to progress and do more and get more achievements and unlock more bonuses or whatever, you have to start really paying out to do that. And I feel like that satisfaction of hitting an achievement sort of is the same sort of dopamine hit that maybe a drug is or would give you. And really, it's very similar. I apologize because I mentioned that I would kind of go over what I've learned and the how this would affect me kind of later on. We're getting to the 10-minute point now, so it's starting to blend in a little bit more than I had anticipated. But this is something I've kind of picked up on, being in college today versus being in college in 2004 to 2008. 18-year-old me, 18 to 22-year-old me was far more susceptible to that distraction. And keep in mind, 2004, 2005, there are not really any smartphones, at least not, the iPhone came out, I think, in 2006, maybe 2007. I certainly couldn't afford one. But, sitting down your computer to do homework and going, oh, maybe I'll log in the computer and look at the news or look at the weather, and kind of going down a rabbit hole, procrastinating, doing the homework. The same thing I think they talk about in this, and that's something I've learned, I think, over the course of the past 10 years, something I learned about myself is realizing the procrastination, realizing that sort of addiction to going on to Facebook, going on to these games, and trying to be a little mature. So now that I'm, I think, 34 this time around, going through college again, understanding those perils and the perils of the internet and trying to kind of set those aside, work over them, work through them. This special certainly highlights it, something I think I've already kind of understood, but it does certainly highlight it. And it's something that I'm always trying to avoid. And I think being a little older helps that versus some of the younger kids in the class or even in the special. It's a little more difficult for them. That can sort of bring us to the final part. Segues pretty well into what I've learned this week and how I'm going to use what I've learned to, or at least in my real life, and certainly to reiterate the digital nation information. Really, you have to look at the internet as it's just a super powerful tool, and that can be used for good, bad, or otherwise. So, it's like a magnifier, an amplifier. If you want to procrastinate and put something aside, it can amplify that ability. If you want to do tremendous good, it can amplify that. It can make a message incredibly powerful by posting it all to the world. It can make a negative message very powerful by posting it all to the world. So I think you need to be aware of that and understand that and be aware of that power to help you kind of navigate that. The other big thing, certainly with the bridge project, I think I really learned that you can have a design that's ambitious and certainly cool looking, right? But you need to have to understand, practically how are you going to make that work? And is it not something that 3 students who have literally nearly no hot gluing experience, is it something that they can reasonably do? So balancing, great planning with more reasonable expectation of skill, what you can do. And the third thing that I've learned is actually how to screencast. As I'm rolling now to my 13th minute of my first screencast. This is probably one of the cooler things that we've done so far. It's certainly my first time doing this. I've used a lot of screencast videos on math assignments and things, watch it type videos. So making one is a ton of fun. I'm not sure if this is any good. We'll find out. The one link that I did really enjoy was Tab's link here. I've already brought that up. Just a good read, and certainly makes sense to me as to why people like it, why it's useful. I certainly, I realized I didn't really know what a screencast was, and then the more I'm realizing, I'm using them all the time, YouTube videos, or again, WebAssign for math assignments, things like that. So am I going to, certainly something I'm going to be using in my life going forward. Probably want to use this a few more times for this class if I can. Maybe try to use this in the professional workplace. I know my work, we do presentations for clients and things. I feel like we're using the same tired PowerPoints, and often just refreshing the same PowerPoints year after year. So some of these things that we've learned, screencast, certainly the Prezi that we did a few weeks ago, these new mediums that are out there, and for the most part free, are really fun, exciting ways to convey information. I think they're more interactive, and I think they're just a lot more fun. So I hope you've enjoyed my weekly summary. Again, this is my first ever screencast, so I was very excited to try this out, and very excited to start next week.